provides all kinds of cancer screenings and other benefits for women in our country. Donald Esmond was in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turn back now. And indeed, he said women should be punished, that there should be some form of punishment for women who obtain abortions, and I could just not be more opposed to that kind of thinking.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but I want to ask you, Secretary Clinton, I want to explore how far you believe the right to abortion goes. You have been quoted as saying that the fetus has no constitutional rights. You also voted against a ban on late-term partial birth abortions. Why?
Because Roe v. Wade very clearly sets out that there can be regulations on abortion so long as the life and the health of the mother are taken into account. And when I voted as a senator, I did not think that that was the case. The kinds of cases that fall at the end of pregnancy are often the most heartbreaking, painful decisions for families to make. I have met with women who have, toward the end of their pregnancy, get the worst news one could get, that their health is in jeopardy if they continue to carry to term, or that something terrible has happened or just been discovered about the pregnancy. I do not think the United States government should be stepping in and making those most personal of decisions. So you can regulate if you are doing so with the life and the health of the mother taken into account.
Mr. Trump, your reaction, and particularly on this issue of late-term partial birth
Well, I think
abortion.
it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me. Because based on what she's saying and based on where she's going and where she's been, you can take the baby...
He's scared shitless, so he's trying to act presidential now?
...in the 9th month, on the final day, and that's not acceptable.
Well, that is not what happens in these cases, and using that kind of scare rhetoric is just terribly unfortunate. You should meet with some of the women that I've met with, women I've known over the course of my life. This is one of the worst possible choices that any woman and her family has to make. And I do not believe the government should be making it. You know, I've had the great honor of traveling across the world on behalf of our country. I've been to countries where governments either forced women to have abortions like they used to do in China, or forced women to bear children like they used to do in Romania. And I can tell you the government has no business in the decisions that women make with their families in accordance with their faith, with medical advice, and I will stand up for that right.
All right. But just briefly, I want to move on to another
Honestly,
segment.
nobody has business doing what I just said, doing that as late as 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days prior to birth. Nobody has that.
All right, let's move on to the subject of immigration.
Oh, now he's down to a day or two.
There is almost no issue that separates the two of you
Backing up.
more than the issue of immigration. Actually, there are a lot of issues that separate the two of you. Mr. Trump, you want to build a wall.
She's having
Secretary
fun,
Clinton,
he's
you
not.
offered
There
no
we go.
specific plan for how you want to secure our southern border. Mr. Trump, you are calling for
Hey, the second one, Gino?
deportations.
What?
Secretary
Try the second
Clinton,
one?
You say that
Second
within your
one
first
what?
100
Dennis?
days as
No.
president, you're going to offer a
The one that
package
you
That
got
was the
today.
first one,
pathway
okay.
to citizenship.
I thought
The
I already
question
seen
really
it through
is,
the
why are
chicken
you
and
right
all
and your
wow, you're
opponent
munching
wrong?
down.
Mr. Trump, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, she wants to give amnesty, which is a disaster and very unfair to all of the people that are waiting in line for many, many years. We need strong borders. In the audience tonight, we have 4 mothers of, I mean, these are unbelievable people that I've gotten to know over a period of years, whose children have been killed, brutally killed.
Over a
by people
period of
that came
years.
into the
He hasn't
country
known them over a
illegally.
period of
We have
years.
thousands of mothers and fathers all over the country. They're coming in illegally. Drugs are pouring in through the border. If we have a border, Hillary wants to give amnesty. She wants to have open borders. The border secure, as you know, the Border Patrol agents, 16,500 plus ICE last week endorsed me. First time they've ever endorsed a candidate. it means their job is tougher. But they know what's going on, and they know it better than anybody. They want strong borders. They feel we have to have strong borders. I was up in New Hampshire the other day. The biggest complaint they have, it's with all of the problems going on in the world, many of the problems caused by Hillary Clinton and by Barack Obama, all of the problems, their single biggest problem is heroin that pours across our southern borders, just pouring and destroying their youth. It's poisoning the blood of their youth.
Coming
and
up
plenty
from
of other
Mexico
people.
to
We have
Massachusetts.
to have strong borders. We have to
Easier to
keep
get
the
it from
drugs
Europe.
out of our country. We are right now. We're getting the drugs. They're getting the cash. We need strong borders. We need absolute. We cannot give amnesty. Now, I want to build.
He's
a wall.
sniffing again.
We need the wall. The Border Patrol,
Here he goes.
ICE, they all want the wall.
Let him go,
We stop
Hillary.
the drugs. We shore up the border. One of my first acts will be to get all of the drug lords, all of the bad ones. We have some bad people in this country that have to go out. We're going to get them out. We're
He's
going to
sniffing
secure
hard.
the border, and once the border is secured,
He's lit up.
date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Mr. Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Secretary Clinton. Basically, why are you right? Mr. Trump is wrong.
Well, as he was talking, I was thinking about a young girl I met here in Las Vegas, Carla, who was very worried that her parents might be deported because she was born in this country, but they were not. They work hard, they do everything they can to give her a good life. And you're right, I don't want to rip families apart. I don't want to be sending parents away from children. I don't want to see the deportation force that Donald has talked about in action in our country. We have 11 million undocumented people. They have 4 million American citizen children, 15 million people. He said as recently as a few weeks ago in Phoenix that every undocumented person would be subject to deportation. Now here's what that means. It means you have to have a massive enforcement presence. Enforcement officers would be going school to school, home to home, business to
That's right.
business, rounding up people who are undocumented. And we would then have to put them on trains, on buses to get them out of our country. I think that is an idea that is not in keeping with who we are as a nation. I think it's an idea that would rip our country apart. I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. And my comprehensive immigration reform plan, of course, includes border security. But I want to put our resources where I think they're most needed, getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported, we should deport them. When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico, he had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it, he choked. And then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of
Oh,
laws.
he's pissed
and that
now.
we can act
Look at his eyes and
accordingly.
face.
And that's why I'm introducing comprehensive immigration
I'm gonna
reform
get you,
in the
bitch.
first 100 days with a path to citizenship.
Thank you,
And she's
Secretary.
not wearing an American flag. Notice that.
I think I should respond to them. First of all, I had a very good meeting with the president of Mexico, very nice man. We will be doing very much better with Mexico on trade deals, believe me. The NAFTA deal signed by her husband is one of the worst deals ever made of any kind, signed by anybody. It's a disaster. Hillary Clinton wanted the wall. Hillary Clinton fought for the wall in 2006 or thereabouts. Now, she never gets anything done, so naturally the wall wasn't built. But Hillary Clinton wanted the wall.
Well, let me...
We are a
wait,
country
sir,
of laws.
Let me...
And by the way,
No, wait, I'd like to hear from...
Well, but
I'd like to hear from...
okay.
I'd like to hear from Secretary Clinton.
I voted for border security, and there are some limited places where that was appropriate. There also is necessarily going to be new technology and how best to deploy that. But it is clear
That's what it all failed,
that
Gene.
Donald has been
I have the reports
proposing.
on
He
it.
started his campaign bashing immigrants.
That was a
calling
Lockheed and
immigrants
Boeing thing, and it all failed.
criminals and drug dealers, that he has a very different view about what we should do to deal with immigrants. Now, what I am also arguing is that bringing
Both the sensor game and the drone
undocumented
thing
immigrants
failed.
out from the shadows,
They're just not telling
putting them into
anybody.
the formal economy will be good because
There's a
then
GAO
employers
report
can't
on it.
exploit them and undercut Americans' wages. And Donald knows a lot about this. He used undocumented labor to build the Trump Tower. He underpaid undocumented workers, and when they complained, he basically said what a lot of employers do. You complain, I'll get you deported. I want to get everybody out of the shadows, get the economy working, and not let employers like Donald exploit undocumented workers, which hurts them, but also hurts
Now he's got
American
to squeeze
workers.
on that one.
President Obama has moved millions of people out. Nobody knows about it, nobody talks about it, but under Obama, millions of people have been moved out of this country. They've been deported. She doesn't want to say that, but that's what's happened, and that's what's happened big league. As far as moving these people out and moving, we either have a country or we don't. We're a country of laws. We either have a border or we don't. Now, you can come back in and you can become a citizen, but it's very unfair. We have millions of people that did it the right way. They're online, they're waiting. We're going to speed up the process bigly because it's very inefficient. But they're online and they're waiting to become citizens. Very unfair that somebody runs across the border, becomes a citizen. Under her plan, you have open borders. You would have a disaster on trade, and you will have a disaster with your open borders. What she doesn't say is that President Obama has deported millions and millions of people just the way that
Secretary Clinton, I want to...
We will not have open borders.
Well, let me ask
That is a rank mischaracterization.
Secretary
We
Clinton.
will have secure borders, but we will also have reform. And this used to be a bipartisan issue. Ronald Reagan was the
Secretary
last
Clinton,
president
excuse
to
me.
sign
Secretary Clinton.
immigration reform, and George W. Bush supported
He's
it as
fucking
well.
up.
Secretary Clinton, I want to clear up your position on this issue because in a speech you gave to a Brazilian bank for which you were paid $225,000, we've learned from the WikiLeaks that you said this, and I want to quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders." So that's the question. That's the
What'd he
question.
say?
Please quiet everybody.
I forget
Is
what he
that your
said.
dream, open borders?
Well, if you went on
Like
to
I
read the
said,
rest
or
of the
something
sentence,
like
I was talking about energy. You know, we trade more energy with our neighbors than we trade with the rest of the world combined. And I do want us to have an electric grid, an energy system that crosses borders. I think that will be a great benefit to us. But you
Not us.
are
They can't
very
supply
clearly
themselves.
quoting from WikiLeaks. And what's really important about WikiLeaks is that the Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites,
Here they go.
American
They'll have one
accounts
place in
of
common.
private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet. This has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election. So I actually think the most important question of this evening, Chris, is finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election?
Oh, my God.
He rejects Russian espionage against Americans,
He's
which
reading
he
it.
actually encouraged in the past. Those are the questions we need answered. We've never had anything like this happen in any of our elections before.
That was a great pivot off the fact that she wants open borders, okay? How did we get off the Putin?
Hold on.
No.
Wait. Hold on, folks, because this is going to end up getting out of control. Let's try to keep it quiet for the candidates and for the American people. Go ahead.
Just to finish on the borders,
Yeah.
she wants open borders. People are going to pour into our country. People are going to come in from Syria. She wants 550% more people than Barack Obama. And he has thousands and thousands of people. They have no idea where they come from. And you see, we are going to stop radical Islamic terrorism in this country. She won't even mention the words, and neither will President Obama. So
Why
I
do
just
they
wanna
have
tell
to listen to
she
you?
wants open borders. Now we can talk about Putin. I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good. He has no respect for her. He has no respect for our president. And I'll tell you what, we're in very serious trouble because we have a country with tremendous numbers of nuclear warheads, 1,800, by the way, where they expanded and we didn't. 1,800 nuclear warheads, and she's playing chicken. Look,
wait.
from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of
No
the United
puppet,
States.
no puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit
No, you're
that
the
the
puppet.
Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout
Wow,
Putin
she's
lies,
giving it back.
sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race.
Black and white. You like
I
that?
think that this is such an unprecedented situation. We've never had a foreign government trying to interfere in our election. We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks, come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our elections. I find that deeply disturbing,
Secretary
and
Clinton,
I think it's
She
time
has no
you
idea
take a
whether it's
stand,
Russia,
because if-
China, or anybody else.
I am not
She
quoting
has no
myself.
idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you have
17,
no idea.
17 do you doubt 17
Our
military
country has
and
no idea.
civilian agencies? Well,
Yeah, I
he'd
doubt
rather
it. I
believe
doubt it.
Vladimir Putin than the military and civilian
Ooh, she
intelligence
just sucked him
professionals
in.
who are sworn to protect us. I find that just absolutely
She doesn't like
frightening.
Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every
Mr.
step
Trump,
of the way.
I-
Excuse me. Putin has
Mr. Trump,
outsmarted her in Syria.
Excuse me, she got it.
Here, I
Every
do get
step of the way.
I do get to ask some questions.
Yes,
And I would
fine.
like to ask you this direct question. The top national security officials of this country do believe that Russia has been behind these attacks. Even if you don't know for sure whether they are, condemn any interference by Russia in the American election.
By Russia or anybody else.
You condemn their interference.
Of course I condemn. Of course I can. I don't know Putin. I have no
I'm not
idea.
asking- I'm asking
I never
you.
met
Yeah.
Putin. This is not my best friend. But if the United States got along with Russia, wouldn't be so bad. Let me tell you, Putin has outsmarted her and Obama at every single step of the way. Whether it's Syria, no, you name it, missiles. Take a look at the startup that they signed. The Russians have said, according to many, many reports, I can't believe they allowed us to do this. They create warheads and we can't. The Russians can't believe it. She has been outsmarted by Putin, and all you have to do is look at the Middle East. They've taken over. We've spent $6 trillion. They've taken over the Middle East. She has been outsmarted and outplayed worse than anybody I've ever seen in any government whatsoever.
We're a long way away from immigration, but I'm going to let you finish this sometime.
Well,
You got about 45 seconds.
Yeah,
And she always will be.
I find it ironic that he's raising nuclear weapons. This is a person who has been very cavalier, even casual, about the use of nuclear weapons. He's advocated more countries getting them, Japan, Korea, even Saudi Arabia. He said, well, we have them, why don't we use them, which I think is terrifying. But here's
Look,
the
he's
deal. The
losing
bottom
it.
line on nuclear weapons is
Closing
when
his
the
eyes,
president
hanging
gives
his
the
head.
order, it must be followed. There's about 4 minutes between the order being given and the people responsible for launching nuclear weapons to do so. And that's why 10 people who have had that awesome responsibility have come out and in an unprecedented way said they would not trust Donald Trump with the nuclear codes or to have his finger on the nuclear button.
I have 200 generals and admirals, 21 endorsements.
Shut him off.
21 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. As far as Japan and other countries, we are being ripped off by everybody in the world. We're defending other countries. We are spending a fortune doing it. They have the bargain of the century.
What's
All
that
I
have to
said
do with
is
the nuclear
we have to
code?
renegotiate these agreements because our country cannot afford to defend Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, South Korea,
So
and
hang
other
out the
places.
nukes.
We cannot.
He's not on the nukes.
She took that as saying
Okay.
nuclear weapons. Look, she's been proven to be a liar on so many different ways. This is just another lie.
Well, I'm just quoting you. When
There's
we're
no
asked
quote.
about
You're not gonna find a
potential
quote from me.
nuclear competition in Asia, you said, go ahead, enjoy yourselves, folks. That kind
And
of
defend
language,
yourselves.
the
And defend
United
yourselves. I
States
didn't say
has
nuclear.
kept
And
the
defend
peace.
yourself.
The United States has kept the peace through our alliances. Donald wants to tear up our alliances. I think it makes the world safer, and frankly, it makes the United States safer. I would work with our allies in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. That's the only way we're going to be able to keep
We are going to move on to the next topic, which is
Yep.
the economy, and I hope we handle that as well as we did immigration. You also have very different
That was
ideas
funny.
about how to get the economy growing faster. Secretary Clinton, in your plan,
I mean, it's 14
government
minutes.
plays a big role. You see more government spending, more entitlements, more tax credits, more tax penalties. Mr. Trump, you want to get government out with lower taxes and less regulation.
Yes.
We're going to drill down into this a little bit more, but in this overview, please explain to me why you believe that your plan will create more jobs and growth for this country, and your opponent's plan will not. In this round, you go first, Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think when the middle class thrives, America thrives. And so my plan is based on growing the economy, giving middle class families many more opportunities. I want us to have the biggest jobs program since World War II, jobs in infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. I think we can compete with high-wage countries, and I believe we should. New jobs in clean energy, not only to fight climate change, which is a serious problem, but to create new opportunities and new businesses. I want us to do more to help small business. That's where 2/3 of the new jobs are going to come from. I want us to improve the national minimum wage, because people who live in poverty who work full-time should not still be in poverty. And I sure do want to make sure women get equal pay for the work we do. I feel strongly that we have to have an education system that starts with preschool and goes through college. That's why I want more technical education at high schools and in community colleges, real apprenticeships to prepare young people for the jobs of the future. I want to make college debt-free, and for families making less than $125,000, you will not get a tuition bill from a public college or university if the plan that I worked on with Bernie Sanders is enacted. And we're going to work hard to make sure that it is, because we are going to go where the money is. Most of the gains in the last years since the Great Recession have gone to the very top. So we are going to have the wealthy pay their fair share. We're going to have
He's shaking his head, yeah, with her.
make a contribution greater than they are now to our country. That is a plan that has been analyzed by independent experts, which said that it could produce 10 million new jobs. By contrast, Donald's plan has been analyzed to conclude it might lose 3.5 million jobs. Why? Because his whole plan is to cut taxes, to give the biggest tax breaks ever to the wealthy and to corporations, adding $20 trillion to our debt and causing the kind of dislocation that we have seen before, because it truly will be trickle-down economics on steroids. So the plan I have, I think, will actually produce greater opportunities. The plan he has will cost us jobs and possibly lead to another Great Recession.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Trump, why will your plan create more jobs and growth than Secretary Clinton?
Well, first of all, before I start on my plan, her plan is going to raise taxes and even double your taxes. Her tax plan is a disaster. And she can say all she wants about college tuition, and I'm a big proponent. We're going to do a lot of things for college tuition, but the rest of the public's going to be paying for it. We will have a massive, massive tax increase under Hillary Clinton's plan. But I'd like to start off where we left, because when I said Japan and Germany, and I'm not to single them out, but South Korea, these are very rich, powerful countries. Saudi Arabia, nothing but money. We protect Saudi Arabia. Why aren't they paying? She immediately, when she heard this, I questioned it. And I questioned NATO. Why aren't the NATO questions? Why aren't they paying? Because they weren't paying. Since I did this was a year ago, all of a sudden they're paying. I've been given a lot of credit for it. All of a sudden they're starting to pay up. They have to pay up. We're protecting people.
What are you talking about? Where I haven't read this shit.
But they have to pay up. She comes out and said, we love our allies, we love our allies and goodwill. It's awfully hard to get them to pay up when you have somebody saying, we think how great they are. We have to tell Japan in a very nice way, we have to tell Germany, all of these countries, South Korea, we have to help us out. We have, during his regime, during President Obama's regime, we've doubled our national debt. We're up to $20 trillion. So my plan, we're going to renegotiate trade deals. We're going to have a lot of free trade. We're going to have free trade, more free trade than we have right now. But we have horrible deals. Our jobs are being taken out by the deal that her husband signed, NAFTA, one of the worst deals ever. Our jobs are being sucked out of our economy. You look at all of the places that I just left. You go to Pennsylvania, you go to Ohio, you go to Florida, you go to any of them. You go upstate New York. Our jobs have fled to Mexico and other places. We're bringing our jobs back. I am going to renegotiate NAFTA. And if I can't make a great deal, then we're going to terminate NAFTA and we're going to create new deals. We're going to have trade. But we're going to terminate it. We're going to make a great trade deal. And if we can't, we're going to do it. We're going to go a separate way because it has been a disaster. We're going to cut taxes massively. We're going to cut business
You
taxes.
saying your next door neighbor, you're going to go fuck off.
People. We're going to bring the $2.5 trillion that's offshore back into the country. We are going to start the engine rolling again because right now our country is dying at 1% GDP.
Well, let me translate that if I can, Chris, because
You can't.
the fact is he's going to advocate for the largest tax cuts we've ever seen, 3 times more than the tax cuts under the Bush administration. I have said repeatedly throughout this campaign, I will not raise taxes on anyone making $250,000 or less. I also will not add a penny to the debt. I have costed out what I'm going to do. He will, through his massive tax cuts, add $20 trillion to the debt. Well, he mentioned the debt. We know how to get control of the debt. When my husband was president, we went from a $300 billion deficit to a $200 billion surplus, and we were actually on the path to eliminating the national debt. When President Obama came into office, he inherited the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. He has cut the deficit by 2/3. So, yes, one of the ways you go after the debt, one of the ways you create jobs is by investing in people. So I do have investments in new jobs, investments in education, skill training, and the opportunities for
You should
people
do that. Don't
to get
you
ahead
do
and
that with
stay
your
ahead.
business,
That's
Mr.
the
Trump?
kind of
Invest?
approach that
Or do
will
you
work.
cut?
Cutting taxes
grow.
on the wealthy, we've tried that.
Secretary.
It has not worked the way that it has been.
Secretary Clinton, I want to pursue your plan because in many ways it is similar to the Obama stimulus plan in 2009, which has led to the slowest GDP growth since 1949.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. You told me in July when we spoke that the problem is that President Obama didn't get to do enough in what he was trying to do with this stimulus. So is your plan basically even more of the Obama stimulus?
Well, it's a combination, Chris. And let me say that when you inherit the level of economic catastrophe that President Obama inherited, it was a real touch-and-go situation. I was in the Senate before I became Secretary of State. I've never seen people as physically distraught as the Bush administration team was because of what was happening to the economy. I personally believe that the steps that President Obama took saved the economy. He doesn't get the credit he deserves for taking some very hard positions. But it was a terrible recession. So now that we've dug ourselves out of it, we're standing, but we're not yet running. So what I am proposing is that we invest from the middle out and the ground up, not the top down. That is not going to work. That's why what I
That's a
have
good
put
one.
forward doesn't add a penny to the debt, but it is the kind of approach that will enable more people to take those new jobs, higher paying jobs. We're beginning to see some increase in incomes, and we certainly have had a long string of increasing jobs. We've got to do more to get the whole economy moving, and that's what I believe I will be able to do.
Mr. Trump, even conservative economists who have looked at your plan say that the numbers don't add up, that your idea, and you've talked about 25 million jobs created, 4%
Over a 10-year period.
growth, is unrealistic. And they say, you talk a lot about growing the energy industry, they say with oil prices as low as they are right now, that's unrealistic as well. Your response?
So I just left some high representatives of India. They're growing at 8%. China is growing at 7%, and that for them is a catastrophically low number. We are growing, our last report came out, and it's right around the 1% level, and I think it's going down. Last week, as you know, the end of last week, they came out with an anemic jobs report, a terrible jobs report. In fact, I said, is that the last jobs report before the election? Because if it is, I should win easily. It was so bad. The report was so bad. Look, our country is stagnant. We've lost our jobs. We've lost our businesses. We're not making things anymore, relatively speaking. Our product is pouring in from China, pouring in from Vietnam, pouring in from all over the world. I've visited so many communities. This has been such an incredible education for me.
I wonder where all Ivanka
I've been
shit
to
is
so
made,
many-
don't
I've
you
been to
know?
so many friends over the last year, and they cry when
Wanna
they see
bet
what's
it's made in
happening. I passed
China?
factories that were thriving 20, 25 years ago, and because of the bill that her husband signed,
Bangladesh,
she
India?
blessed 100%.
Vietnam?
It is just horrible what's happened to these people in these communities. Now, she can say that her husband did well, but boy, did they suffer as NAFTA kicked in, because it didn't really kick in very much, but it kicked in after they left. Boy, did they suffer. That was one of the worst things that's ever been signed by our country. Now she wants to sign Trans-Pacific Partnership, and she wants it. She lied when she said she didn't call it the gold standard in one of the debates. She totally lied. She did call it the gold standard, and they actually fact-checked, and they said I was right.
I want to give you a chance to briefly speak to that, then I want to pivot to 1/6
And that
of the
will be as
economy,
bad as now.
which is Obamacare, but go ahead,
Well,
briefly.
first, let me say, number one, when I saw the final agreement for TPP, I said I was against it. It didn't meet my tests. I've had the same test. Does it create jobs, raise incomes, and further our national security? I'm against it
Sorry,
now.
Donald,
I'll be
you got
against it
fucked
after the
there.
election. I'll be against it when I'm president. There's only one of us on this stage who's actually shipped jobs to Mexico, because that's Donald. He's shipped jobs to 12 countries, including Mexico. But he mentioned China. And, you know, one of the biggest problems we have with China is the illegal dumping of steel and aluminum into our markets. I have fought against that. As a senator, I've stood up against it as Secretary of State. Donald has bought Chinese steel and aluminum. In fact, the Trump hotel right here in Las Vegas was made with Chinese steel. So he goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is, but he has given jobs to Chinese steel workers, not American steel
Mr.
workers.
Trump?
That's the kind of
Well, let me
approach
just say-
that
let me
is
just
just
say.
not going to work.
It
We're going to
just-
pull the country together. We're going to have
She
trade
butt-fucked him
agreements
right
that we
there.
enforce. That's why I'm going to have a trade prosecutor for the first time in history, and we're going to enforce
She
those
butt-fucked
agreements.
Trump right
And we're
there,
going
dude.
to look for businesses
Did you see that?
to help us by buying American products.
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
ask
Trump.
He shut her down.
She's
Shut him
been
down.
doing this for 30 years. Why the hell didn't you do it over the last 15, 20 years? You
No,
were
I
very
voted-
much involved, excuse me, my turn. You were very much involved in every aspect of this country, very much. And you do have experience. I'd say the one thing you have over me is experience, but it's bad experience, because what you've done has turned out badly. For 30 years, you've been in a position to help, and if you say that I use steel or I use something else, I make it impossible for me to do that. I wouldn't mind. The problem is you talk, but you don't get anything done, Hillary.
Oh, I couldn't do
Just like
anything
when you
else.
ran the
Oh, my
State Department.
God.
$6 billion was missing. How do you miss $6 billion? You ran the State Department. $6 billion was either stolen, they don't know. It's gone. $6 billion. If you become president, this country is going to be in some mess, believe me.
Well, first of all, what he just said about the State Department is not only untrue, it's been debunked numerous times, but I think it's really an important issue. He raised the 30 years of experience. So let me just talk briefly about that. You know, back in the 1970s, I worked for the Children's Defense Fund, and I was taking on discrimination against African American kids in schools. He was getting sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination in his apartment buildings. In the 1980s, I was working to reform the schools in Arkansas. He was borrowing $14 million from his father to start his businesses. In the 1990s, I went to Beijing, and I said women's rights are human rights. He insulted a former Miss Universe, Alicia Machado, called her an eating machine.
Give me a-
And on the day when I was in the Situation Room, monitoring the raid that brought Osama bin Laden to justice, he was hosting the Celebrity Apprentice. So I'm happy to compare my 30 years of experience, what I've done for
Ooh,
this
that was
country,
good.
trying to help in every way I could, especially kids and families, get ahead and stay ahead with your 30 years, and I'll let the American people make that decision.
Well, I think I did a much better job. I built a massive company, a great company, some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world, worth many, many billions of dollars. I started with a $1 million loan. I agree with that. It's a $1 million loan, but I built a phenomenal company. And if we could run our country the way I've run my company, we would have a country that you would be so proud of. You would even be proud of it. And frankly, when you look at her real record, take a look at Syria, take a look at the migration, take a look at Libya, take a look at Iraq. She gave us ISIS because her and Obama created this huge vacuum. And a small group came out of that huge vacuum because we should have never been in Iraq, but once we were there, we should have never got out the way they wanted to get out. She gave us ISIS.
We didn't have any choice, you
are
dumb
sitting
fuck.
there, and what happened is now ISIS is...
He believes that America can tell anybody to do whatever the fuck they want.
She's going to get rid of nobody.
All right, we are going to get to foreign hotspots in a few moments, but the next segment is fitness to be President of the United States. Mr. Trump, at the last debate, you said your talk about grabbing women was just that, talk, and that you've never actually done it. And since then, as we all know, 9 women have come forward and said that you either groped them or kissed them without their consent. Why would so many different women from so many different circumstances over so many different years, why would they all in this last couple of weeks make up, you deny this, why would they all make up these stories? And since this is a question for both of you, Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump says what your husband did and that you defended was even worse. Mr. Trump, you go first.
Well, first of all, those stories have been largely debunked. Those people, I don't know those people. I have a feeling how they came. I believe it was her campaign that did it. Just like if you look at what came out today on the clips, where I was wondering what happened with my rally in Chicago, other rallies where we had such violence. She's the one in Obama that caused the violence. They hired people, they paid them $1,500, and they're on tape saying, be violent, cause fights, do bad things. I would say the only way, because those stories are all totally false, I have to say that. And I didn't even apologize to my wife, who's sitting right here, because I didn't do anything. I didn't know any of these women. I didn't see these women. These women, the woman on the plane, the woman,
all the way
I think they want either fame or her campaign did it. And I think it's her campaign. Because what I saw, what they did, which is a criminal act, by the way, where they're telling people to go out and start fistfights and start violence. And I'll tell you what, in particular in Chicago, people were hurt and people could have been killed in that riot. And that was now all on tape, started by her. I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all totally, it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
Well,
Secretary Clinton.
at the last debate, we heard Donald talking about what he did to women. And after that, a number of women have come forward saying that's exactly what he did to them. Now, what was his response? Well, he held a number of big rallies where he said that he could not possibly have done those things to those women because they were not attractive enough for
I did not
them
say
to be
that.
assaulted.
I did not say that.
In fact, he went on to say...
Her 2 minutes, sir, her 2 minutes.
But did not say that.
It's her 2 minutes.
He went on to say, look at her, I don't think so. About another woman, he said, that wouldn't be my first choice. He attacked the woman reporter writing the story, called her disgusting, as he has called a number of women during this campaign. You know, Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like. So we now know what Donald thinks and what he says and how he acts toward women. That's who Donald is. I think it's really up to all of us to demonstrate who we are and who our country is, and to stand up and be very clear about what we expect from our next president, how we want to bring our country together,
Want to
where
sit
we
here?
don't want to have the kind of pitting of people one against the other, where instead we celebrate our diversity, we lift people up, and we make our country even greater. America is great because America is good. And it really is up to all of us to make that true now and in the future, and particularly for our children and our grandchildren.
Mr. Trump,
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody. Nobody has more respect.
please, everybody.
And frankly, those stories have been largely debunked. And I really want to just talk about something slightly different. She mentions this, which is all fiction, all fictionalized, probably or possibly started by her and her very sleazy campaign. But I will tell you, what isn't fictionalized are her emails, where she destroyed 33,000 emails criminally, after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress. What happened to the FBI? I don't know. We have a
He's
great
got a
general,
stress thing with breathing, doesn't he?
today, you read it in all the papers, going to potentially serve 5 years in jail for lying to the FBI. One lie. She's lied hundreds of times to the people, to Congress, and to the FBI. He's going to probably go to jail. This is a 4-star general. And she gets away with it, and she can run for the presidency of the United States. That's really what you should be talking about, not fiction, where somebody wants fame or where they come out of her crooked campaign.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, every time Donald is pushed on something which is obviously uncomfortable, like what these women are saying, he immediately goes to denying responsibility. And it's not just about women. He never apologizes or says he's sorry for anything. So we know what he has said and what he's done to women. But he also went after a disabled reporter, mocked and mimicked him on national television. He went after Mr. and Mrs. Khan, the parents of a young man who died serving our country, a Gold Star family, because of their religion. He went after John McCain, a prisoner of war, said he prefers people who aren't captured. He went after a federal judge, born in Indiana, but who Donald said couldn't be trusted to try the fraud and racketeering case against Trump University because his parents were Mexican. So it's not one thing, this is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country, where he incites violence, where he applauds people who are pushing and pulling and punching at his rallies. That is not who America is. And I hope that as we move in the last weeks of this campaign, more and more people will understand what's at stake in this election. It really does come down to what kind of country we are going to have.
So sad when she talks about violence at my rallies, and she caused the violence. So take it.
During the last...
The other things are false, but honestly, I'd love to talk about getting rid of ISIS, and I'd love to talk about other things.
Okay.
But those other charges, as she knows, are false.
In this bucket about fitness to be president, there's been a lot of developments over the last 10 days since the last debate. I'd like to ask you about them. These are questions that the American people have. Secretary Clinton, during your 2009 Senate confirmation hearing, you promised to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest with your dealing with the Clinton Foundation while you were Secretary of State. But emails show that donors got special access to you. Those seeking grants for Haiti relief were considered separately from non-donors, and some of those donors got government contracts, taxpayer money. Can you really say that you kept your pledge to that Senate committee, and why isn't what happened and what went on between you and the Clinton Foundation, why isn't it what Mr. Trump calls pay to play?
Well, everything I did as Secretary of State was in furtherance of our country's interests and our values. The State Department has said that. I think that's been proven. But I am happy. In fact, I'm thrilled to talk about the Clinton Foundation because it is a world-renowned charity, and I am so proud of the work that it does. You know, I could talk for the rest of the debate. I know I don't have the time to do that. But just briefly, The Clinton Foundation made it possible for 11 million people around the world with HIV/AIDS to afford treatment, and that's about half of all the people in the world who are getting treatment. In partnership with the American Health Association, we have made environments in schools healthier for kids,
Secretary
including
Clinton,
healthier
respectfully, this is an open discussion.
Well, it is an open discussion.
I understand, and the specific
You-
question went to pay for play. Do you want to
Well,
talk about
but there
that?
is no,
look,
but there
I
is
think
no
that it's
evidence,
been
but
very well studied.
there is a lot of evidence
been very well
about the
studied.
very good work
And it's a
the
criminal
high
enterprise,
ratings that
and
the
so many
Please let
people know
Mr.
it.
Trump speak.
It's a
Foundation got
criminal
for their work.
enterprise. Saudi Arabia giving $25 billion, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. So I'd like to ask you right now, why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly? Why don't you give back the money? I think it would be a great gesture.
Well-
because she takes a tremendous amount of money, and you take a look at the people of Haiti. I was in Little Haiti the other day in Florida, and I want to tell you, they hate the Clintons, because what's happened in Haiti with the Clinton Foundation is a disgrace. And you know it, and they know it, and everybody knows it.
Secretary
Well,
Clinton.
very quickly, we at the Clinton Foundation spend 90% of all the money that is donated on behalf of programs of people around the world and in our own country. I'm very proud of that. We have the highest rating from the watchdogs that follow foundations, and I'd be happy to compare what we do with the Trump Foundation, which took money from other people and bought a 6-foot portrait of Donald. I mean, who does that? It just was astonishing. But when it comes to Haiti, Haiti is the poorest country in our hemisphere. The earthquake and the hurricanes, it has devastated Haiti. Bill and I have been involved in trying to help Haiti for many years. The Clinton Foundation raised $30 million to help Haiti after the catastrophic earthquake and all of the terrible problems the people there had. We've done things to help small businesses, agriculture, and so much else. And we're going to keep working to help Haiti because it's an important part of the American
They don't want you to help them anymore.
I'd
I'd like to mention one thing. Trump Foundation, small foundation. People contribute, I contribute. The money goes 100% goes to different charities, including a lot of military. I don't get anything. I don't buy boats. I don't buy planes. What happens?
Wasn't
Money goes out.
some of the money used to settle your lawsuit, sir?
No, it was. We put up the American flag, and that's it. They put up the American flag. We fought for the right in Palm Beach to put up the American.
There was a penalty that was imposed by Palm Beach County, and the money came from your foundation.
And by the way, the money
instead of Mar-a-Lago or
money
yourself.
went to Fisher House, where they build houses. The money that you're talking about went to Fisher House, where they build houses for veterans and disabled.
I want to get into one
But of
last...
course, there's no way we can know whether any of that is true because he hasn't released his tax returns. He is the first candidate ever to run for president in the last 40-plus years who has not released his tax returns. So everything he says about charity or anything else, we can't prove it. You can look at our tax returns. We've got them all out there. But what is really troubling is that we learned in the last debate he has not paid a penny in federal income tax. And we were talking about immigrants a few minutes ago, Chris. You know, half of all immigrants, undocumented immigrants in our country, actually pay federal income tax. So we have undocumented immigrants in America who are paying more federal income tax than a billionaire. I find
So
that
let me just tell you very
astonishing.
simply, we're entitled, because of the laws that people like her pass, to take massive amounts of depreciation and other charges, and we do it. And all of her donors, just about all of them, I know Buffett took hundreds of millions of dollars, George Soros, took hundreds of millions of dollars. Let me just explain. All of her donors, most of her donors
Mr.
have
Trump,
done
shut 'em up.
I do.
Okay.
And you know what you should have done?
Folks, we heard
And
this.
you know, Hillary, what you should have done? You should have changed the law when you were a United States Senator. If you
Folks,
don't
we
like
heard
it.
this.
Yeah.
Because your donors and your special interests are doing the same thing as I do, except even more so.
Well,
you should have changed the law, but you won't change the law because you take in so much money. I mean, I sat in my apartment today on a very beautiful hotel down the street, known as
Made with Chinese steel.
But I will tell you, I sat there watching ad after ad after ad, false ad, all paid for by your friends on Wall Street that gave so much money because they know you're going to protect them, and frankly, you should have changed the
Mr.
laws.
Trump-
If you don't like what I did, you should have changed the law.
Mr. Trump, I want to ask you about one last question in this topic. You have been warning at rallies recently that this election is rigged and that Hillary Clinton is in the process of trying to steal it from you. Your running mate, Governor Pence, pledged on Sunday that he and you, his words, will absolutely accept the result of this election. Today, your daughter Ivanka said the same thing. I want to ask you here on the stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of
How to
this
get his
election?
I will
attention.
look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing. And the New York Times actually wrote an article about it that they don't even care. It's so dishonest, and they poison the minds of the voters. But unfortunately for them, I think the voters are seeing through it. I think they're going to see through it. We'll find out on November 8th, but I think they're going to see through
But,
it.
sir, there's
If
a...
you look, excuse me, Chris, if you look at your voter rolls, you will see millions of people that are registered to vote. Millions. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from Pew Report and other places. Millions of people that are registered to vote that shouldn't be registered to vote. So, let me just give you one other thing. So I talk about the corrupt media. I talk about the millions of people. Tell you one other thing. She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged. Because she should never, Tris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
But, sir, there is a
Quadruple
tradition-
down.